Hello, and welcome to Midwest Writers Room. Our mission is to encourage, educate, and celebrate writers of the Midwest. I'm Luella Schmidt.
And I'm Ken Humphrey. Today's chapter break episode features Silvia Acevedo and her latest publication, Mail Order Monsters Crash Course, which came out August 26th, 2025.
Silvia Acevedo writes stories for kids and adults who want magic and mystery in their world. She stirred up monster hijinks in her latest title, Mail Order Monsters Crash Course. And she called up a Wisconsin ghost in the spooky anthology, The Haunted States of America. Before that, she barely escaped the god's wrath in her mythological God Awful series. Sylvia's worked in New York publishing, led the Wisconsin chapter of the Society of Children's Book Writers and Illustrators, and served on the board of directors for the Wisconsin Writers Association.
So, unsurprisingly, it may come as no shock to our viewers and listeners that Silvia is a friend of WWA, a well-known name, one of our emeritus board members. Let's take a look at Mail Order Monsters. A 10-year-old boy desperate for a new best friend orders monsters from an ad at the back of an old comic book. Marco Torres needs a new bestie. His best friend isn't talking to him, and he's suddenly got a bully, the twin of his crush. So when Marco spots an ad in the back of a comic book for mail order monsters, he's in. Unleashing their magic unleashes trouble. And when his ex-bestie challenges him to settle their score, it's Marco's monsters against his robot in a remote-controlled truck race through the neighborhood junkyard. But Marco soon wonders exactly what he's fighting for.
Fantastic. Sylvia, we're so happy to welcome you to Midwest Writers Room. How you doing today?
Great. Thank you so much for having me. I'm looking forward to this talk.
Yep, we are as well. And in the interest of fair disclaimer, I actually read and reviewed Sylvia's book earlier this year, a pre-production copy for our WWA review program. And while,
And I thank you for that.
Yeah. And this generally isn't my go-to genre, but I got wrapped up in it to the point that there's a scene towards the end where they're racing. I started thinking through the physics of what was going on. Right? That's kind of how I got caught up in. Generally, books in this genre, I don't think are meant to make adults, although you could wonder if I'm actually one of those, but make adults think about the physics of what's going on. But to me, that was a sign of good writing as I'm thinking about, God, could that really happen? So way to go, Silvia.
Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate it. Yeah, those last couple of chapters are humdingers, aren't they? They just zip right past.
Yes, absolutely. So let's dive into the book itself. So it's a monster-filled romp, right? And it's got a lot of heart to it. And a lot of the themes that you, I think, played with in this were about friendship, loneliness. I mean, that part really came through. The feelings
I'm glad to hear.
Yeah, just kind of, and I think we all had this when we were young. Like we got in a fight with our best friend. And so there's that feeling of, God, now what do I do? So I guess what prompted that when you're writing this story?
I had this whole idea of these monsters being ordered from an ad in the back of a comic book. And as I was writing the story, I was like, well, what would prompt that? Why would a kid order monsters except, just for the fun of it? But, just for the fun of it just wasn't really strong enough. And so I thought, he might order monsters if he needs a friend. Well, why would he need a friend? Kids have lots of friends. They go to school or they have homeschooling groups or whatnot, and they have friends. I thought, well, what if he has a falling out with a friend and he orders the monsters because he's lonely? And in this instance, he really is lonely. He's had a falling out with his friend at the start of his 5th grade year. So that's the final year of elementary school for most, in a lot of schools. And he'd be going off to middle school the next year. And he also suddenly has a little bit of a crush, his first crush. And he doesn't really even understands what that means. It's very innocent, and he's kind of exploring those emotions. And then he has a new bully who, in a mean twist of fate, is the twin brother of his crush. And so with all these new feelings, he really needs someone to talk to. And he doesn't have that anymore with his fight with his ex-best friend. So he decides, I need someone to talk to. I need to try these mail order monsters and see if they're real.
So I have to ask then, did you read comic books when you were young? How did you know that we had all these mail order things in the back, like the Joe Weider muscle building series that I may or may not have ordered when I was 10?
Well, yes, I did. Not as much as my husband, who works in the fantasy illustration field. And so when we were talking about book ideas, this is one of the ideas that he had popped up with, and we talked about it over the years and such. And so we both kind of are in that background. He did the illustrations for the book, both the cover and the interior illustrations, and he's done things for Star Wars and Magic the Gathering and Lord of the Rings and Marvel and Dungeons and Dragons, all that sort. So we're very steeped into that world. So yeah, being that way, since we both have been that way, yeah, I definitely knew about the ads at the back of the comic books. And I even ordered those. Oh, what are those little growing mermaids? The little
Yes.
oh, I
What were
don't
those? Those
remember what
little
they're called.
plant things that were
Right?
supposed to
Yes.
grow.
So,
And
so
what
lots
were
of
they?
people, lots
Like
of
the little
people order them.
seahorses?
That's
Yeah.
it. That's it. The
Yes.
seahorse. Yes.
Guilty as charged.
Yeah. So, it's a harmless little toy. And if you end up losing money on it, no big deal, right? But Marco really does pin his hopes on this. In the one hand, he knows this can't possibly be real. It's preying on my hopes and dreams, and I need magic to make it work. But on the other hand, he's so desperate, he's really hoping that it works out. So there's a push and pull there.
I love it. Well, and you have Spanish kind of sprinkled in, and the main character speaks some Spanish and some Spanglish. Like how did you sort of approach that?
Yes, the main character, Marco, he's 10 years old, and he is a Puerto Rican boy who goes to school on Milwaukee's South Side. And so he does have Spanish speaking parents, and he talks a lot of Spanish. And well, he's spoken to a lot in Spanish at home, and his Spanish is okay. He needs to speak a little bit of Spanglish here and there. And I sprinkled it in throughout because that's his normal world. And some of it I translate, some of it you can understand by context. And if you can't either way, you could skip right over it. There's nothing critical that's spoken to in the Spanish. But if you do understand Spanish, it's fun to see that in there. And I know as a kid, I would have loved to read a book where there was some Spanish and Spanglish mixed in.
That's quite the skill, actually, to be able to, you know, um, include that enough of that to make the story and knowing when you can skip over it. As like when you're giving that to the reader, it's okay if you don't know it, you can skip over it and it won't hurt. I don't know. I feel like that's a pretty cool skill that you have.
Most of the times when it's skipping over, it's more of an exclamation. So
Sure.
he would say something in Spanish that, you could tell by the exclamation points that those were him saying, "Oh, wow, gee," something like that. So it's,
Sure.
yeah.
One thing
Yeah.
I liked too with that when I was reading it is that it just happened, right? It wasn't the reason for the book. It wasn't, anything identified with the book. It just happened because that's his life. So there's no explanation needed in terms of why this was being dropped in. So I like that. It was part of the backdrop.
Thank
Yeah.
you,
I think a
Ken,
lot
for
of us.
saying that. Really, thank you, because there are so many. When I was growing up, the reason I said that I would have liked to have seen that when I was growing up is because when I was growing up, there were so many books. If they were in Spanish, they were kind of trauma books. They were about conquest and colonialization and oppression. And you know, little Spanish speaking kids want to have fun too. They just want to read about fun monsters. They don't necessarily want to make a thing of their Spanish. So I really appreciate you saying that. That means a great deal to me.
That's great. So, how about sharing with our listeners any struggles or notable moments that you had along your journey as you were trying to bring this book to life?
Oh, this book, Luella, this book took so long to bring to market. I wrote it back in the early or mid aughts, okay? And in 2009, I had a book deal in hand, actually with Parachute Publishing, which is run by R.L. Stein of Goosebumps and his wife, Jane. And I came this close to signing with them, but the contract was it was a little vague for me. So I got in touch with an agent. The agent looked it over, and
Oh,
the deal fell through, and it didn't sell elsewhere. And so it took it that was a little bit of a heartbreak. But I said, okay, I'm going to put this aside, write some other things, and I came back to it, and hate to admit it, but that time allowed, I got better as a writer. And so it allowed me to revise the book. And now I think it's actually a much stronger book than it would have been had it come out back then. Unless, of course, I got a lot of help. But I think I'm proud of how it came out now. And I'm so glad that my husband was able to illustrate it. It's a joint project, and we're very proud of it.
So that makes me kind of curious, so the book's what, roughly almost 20 years old from the time you started it. There'll have been a lot of technology changes just on the everyday consumer. Did you have to go and update that for this most recent version from what you originally had?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. There wasn't one of the, you may remember, Ken, that Marco, my protagonist, he basically doesn't use his phone anymore. And that helps to make him have to communicate with his classmates in school or face to face. And he doesn't do that because, for a couple of reasons. First of all, because he has this fight and he doesn't want to get into more drama online. But I don't even really mention that. Really, the reason is because he's an artist himself. And so he wants to spend his time doing art. He doesn't really use his phone for much because it would be a time suck away from his creative endeavors. Writers, anyone hear me out there?
Oh my gosh, I was totally like, this kid is wiser than I am.
Oh, so yeah, he just doesn't really use his phone very much. Now, the phones do become an issue later on because when his best friend Tinker later on challenges him to a duel, not a duel, a what would I call it? That kind of a something to settle the score, right? A little challenge to settle the score. Um, there is another classmate named Jimena, and she is very much the class gossip, and so she spreads the story over the internet very quickly. So a lot of people show up to the race.
Nice. Well, now, before we ask you to do a little read of this, I wonder if you would just share a tiny bit with our listeners about Marco Torres. Tell us just a little bit about him as a character. And I thought it was so interesting that you made his bully the twin of his crush.
Yes. So, okay, so Marco Torres, he's 10 years old. He's just started fifth grade, and his best friend is Tinker Tubbs. And so Tinker is a tinkerer. He likes to mess with electronic things. And Marco is an artist. And they have been friends since Tinker moved in when he was very little, a toddler. And Marco has this girl in his class named Maite, who is, he suddenly has these new feelings for that he doesn't really even understand. He doesn't know, like, what is this? Why is my heart flipping and flopping every time she comes in? Why do I become this kind of stumbling fool? But Maite's brother, Knox, is the one that is suddenly bullying Marco. And by the way, the bullying might have something to do with the crush. I won't say. You have to read the story to find out. But yeah, Knox is the one that is kind of making life hard for him in school. And so he's got this. He's also trying to start one other thing I didn't mention. He's also trying to start an art club at school. And this would normally be the sort of thing that he would be having his friends champion with him, and he's on his own for that. So he's kind of just trying to make it through the year, and he doesn't want to apologize to Tinker for what he might have done wrong to Tinker, and Tinker's not apologizing to him. So they're at an impasse. Now, usually we know that now that we're grown, we know that kids tend to apologize and settle their issues pretty quickly. So when this has gone on to the 2 week mark, this is a very big deal for them both, for everybody around them.
Yep. Very nice. All right. This sounds like such a lovely book. I'm excited to hear a snippet of it. So when you're ready, go ahead and start and maybe orient us and our listeners slash viewers as to where in the book you're sharing.
Okay, so Marco has ordered his monsters through magic. He has brought them to life and he has revealed them at school. And they have been at school for about a week and they are wowing and charming everyone. And Marco's had to deal with the problems that come with monsters being at school. They escaped his desk. They ran amok through the school. He was lucky that the other adults didn't see it and get him into trouble. But now that he has managed to scare Knox a little bit, and he has managed to make Tinker jealous. Now Tinker is going to play a little bit of offense. So here we are, chapter 21, The Bet. Friday, Marco could tell Tinker was up to something. His former friend glowered and slammed his desk closed more than once. During lunch, he kept glancing over his shoulder and scowling at Marco and anyone else at his table. At recess, Tinker finally threw down the gauntlet. All right, since you have new friends, I'll show off my new friend. I just finished him, and I bet my robot can beat your monsters any day of the week. He was being overly loud, trying to draw attention. It was very un-Tinker-like. The kids near them stopped whatever they were playing. They waved to others on the playground to come on over, listen in, make this a thing. Marco watched them draw near. Tink's trying to win the crowd. Fine, but everyone loves my monsters, and this scene Tink's making isn't opening any doors of friendship. Marco's earlier feelings of forgiveness evaporated. Like mist rising off a lake, a memory surfaced in Marco's mind of the two of them walking around town with their remote-control trucks. Marco had shown more finesse maneuvering than Tinker had, probably thanks to his years of handling a paintbrush. He had a lot of manual dexterity. He found himself grinning. All right, Tinker, it's a bet. Tinker's eyes grew a fraction bigger, as if not expecting him to take up his challenge. Marco straightened and leveled his expression. I propose a race. Tinker chortled. Marco, robots don't tire. They can outpace any living creature, if that's what those monsters of yours even are. So, even though you called for a bet, you won't take it? Tinker's mouth tightened into a thin line, and Marco let the challenge hang in the air. He figured he had already tried breaking the ice by offering to let Tinker feed his monsters. This bet, this escalation, was all on Tinker. Besides, if he won, maybe Maite might be impressed. Anyway, I don't mean a foot race, Marco went on. I mean a race on wheels. Your robot versus one of my monsters on our remote control trucks. You want to challenge me using something electronic? Tinker said, as if pointing out the obvious and the stupid. Marco noticed kids' heads swivel to follow them, their attention batted with each volley. Look, I'm sure you've already modified your truck to make it faster or more energy efficient. I'm guessing you added nitrous oxide or magic pixie paste to increase its output. I don't care how you modified it, but bring it back to specs. And your robot can't be a part of the truck. The robot has to be a separate thing. Your robot and my monster will have to drive our trucks using the same remote controls we would if we were driving. Just tape the controller onto the hood or whatever. But they'll drive, not us. The challenge here is to see whether one of your robots can outdrive one of my monsters, assuming you can teach your robot to drive. Tinker's eyes narrowed into slits. He practically hissed. I absolutely can program a robot to drive. Well then, that's settled. Robot versus monsters on monster trucks. Pedal to the metal. The first to cross the finish line shows which of us was right all along. The crowd hooted and hollered and raised fists and jumped all around them before Tinker even had a chance to reply. They couldn't wait to see this, and Tinker would be in a bad spot if he refused. Tinker balled his fist and leaned in. Where and when? The crowd froze, dying for details. 1 week from tomorrow, came a voice from the back of the crowd, a voice that always made him catch his breath. He pulled his eyes away from Tinker to see Maite push her way to the front and stand between them. Is that enough time for you two idiots? This is the stupidest way ever to settle an argument. Maite planted her fists on her hips. But if it's what you two decide, fine, just fine. But I picked the course. She pointed her thumb at her chest, then 2 fingers toward them. You two won't know where it is until the day of the race, so neither of you can practice there and gain an advantage. You'll have 1 week to prepare, and I'll tell you this much, I'll make the course difficult, with obstacles and complications. I won't make it easy for you two fools to finish. Word of the race spread through school like germs in Play-Doh.
Okay, so we get these episodes and people come on and they read their books, and it's a different skill than writing a book. reading one out. And some do their books justice by the way they read, some, may not. You acted out your book just from your gestures, your
Do you
expressions.
hate that?
No,
It's
way to go,
lovely. It's
Silvia.
wonderful.
That was fantastic. I ended up just watching you more than listening to the words, because I'm just watching your expressions and all that. And so you absolutely did your excerpt justice.
Thank you.
You
Thank you.
sure did. You absolutely did. So tell everybody where they can find more about you, where they can find your book.
So readers can find me at my website, silviaacevedo.com, and they can pick up Mail Order Monsters Crash Course basically anywhere where books are sold. If your bookstore isn't carrying it, they can order it for you. But if you live in Southeast Wisconsin, you can pick up signed copies at some of the local bookstores here, including Boswell Books, Books and Company in Oconomowoc, Daydream Believers in Lake Mills. And or you can order it through my publishing website, 3pointspublishing.com, and you can get a signed copy there as well.
And do you have any events on the horizon? A little birdie told me that you may be down in my neck of the woods in Burlington.
Oh, yes. Yes, I do have some events coming up. Thank you for asking. October 26th, I am going to be at Reads by the River's bookstore's local author fair. Reads by the River is in Waterford, and they have a local book fair that just started last year, and now it's in its second year, and they are doubling the number of authors that are going to be there. They're going to be almost 50 there with their wide array of offerings. So that is a place where you can pick up a great read, maybe get some holiday shopping done early. And I'm excited for that one. That is running, again, October 26th. November 9th at Burlington, Wisconsin Public Library, there's going to be a children's festival, and I'm going to be one of the authors there selling my book and signing. And that event is wonderful if you're in that area, because that is also a fundraiser for a library extension. So it's for a good cause. And again, you can pick up some things for the holiday. And then my last event for the year is, it's actually a closed event, so a lot of the listeners won't be able to go to it, but it's for the Wisconsin School Social Workers Association Conference on November 13th and 14th. I'm very proud to be the sole author chosen to display at this year's event. And I think that might have to do with the fact that this book does deal with some bullying, and it does deal with friendship breakups and makeups and first crushes. And these are all topics that the social workers surely have to face. And so they chose me to be there, and I'm just really thrilled about that and honored, because that is such a noble profession.
Yeah, wait till they add monster management to the social workers caseload. Then
Isn't that a lot of management issues already? You don't need to add to that.
All right, so I want to take this moment then to thank Silvia for dropping by and taking time to introduce everybody out there to Mail Order Monsters. We appreciate everybody hanging out with us in the Midwest Writers Room. I'm Ken Humphrey.
And I'm Luella Schmidt. Words ignite imaginations and spark change. Never underestimate the power of storytelling.
Midwest Writers Room is a production of the Wisconsin Writers Association. Writing and editing by Luella Schmidt and Ken Humphrey. Sound design and editing by Ken Humphrey. Music for the Midwest Writers Room was written by Michael Ramir C. For more information, please visit wiwrite.org/podcast. Thank you.